If this thing does break out and it actually is a cup and handle, then what that means is, gee whiz, industrials, they're moving along the sector. And actually, that means we're right in this area. It is interesting. We were talking earlier about how energy is starting to firm up and how some of the commodities are starting to firm up, natural gas. If we do see the industrials start to actually outperform, then that would support the theory that indeed the economy is over here based on what we see out of the entire quarter, not over here. And what we should see is we should see in the first 2 weeks of the quarter, money start pouring into this area of the market. We want to look at the sector rotation perf charts here on stockcharts.com. What was the message from the fund managers to start this quarter? So this quarter, of course, started back there in April 1st. So there is April 1st. So there is the quarter so far. Now that's an interesting image because remember we said XLI and XLB basic materials, they're actually the ones that are strongest right now. So that's fascinating how on the entire quarter, they're actually some of the weakest. Now let's take a look at what the first 2 weeks study suggested. And maybe these things, there's just a bit of window dressing to bring these things back. I don't know. Let's take a look. So let's zoom back over time to the first 2 weeks of the quarter. So April first week was the 7th. Remember, there was a Easter holiday weekend. Second week, first 2 week study was the 14th. So there's the 6th. Okay, so we went 6th right to 10th. So I guess the 7th was a Saturday. Am I reading that correct? Oh, probably because the first Friday of April is a holiday, isn't it? Right? That's Easter. So I guess Easter came really, really late this year. So anyway, the point of the matter here is the first week was very, very splotchy. But here is the that first week. Interesting. There's industrials, there's materials. It's pretty weak. So maybe they need to back off a little bit over the next couple of days. It's interesting how utilities and healthcare were actually the outperformers. Communication services was actually an outperformer. If we look at the first 2 weeks in total, so that's to the 14th. Interesting. Communication services, healthcare, utilities, and even financials to a certain degree outperforming. Was this an anomaly? Maybe. Interesting how the industrials and basic materials, the ones that we said are strongest right now, they were pretty darn weak. I guess if anything, I get the impression that if we look at this from the sector rotation model, this would be suggesting that the fund managers think we were somewhere in here. Full recovery, market top, getting ready for a bear market. Market's going to roll over. And this is what we had in store for us. So let's try and remember that. In fact, here, why don't we even go? So it looks to me like the market and the fund managers, they were thinking that we were somewhere in this part of the economic cycle. Were they even remotely accurate? So we've got now 2 days left. Today, tomorrow, and Friday. Keep in mind, we have 3 days settlement. So that means theoretically, if you buy something today, it doesn't settle until the actual first day of the next quarter. And keep in mind that these quarterly reports for mutual funds and stuff like that, they go out. And if you bought something today as a mutual fund manager, it won't show as settled until next quarter. So you're going to do your window dressing, you actually have to have it done by yesterday, believe it or not. So that means that we can actually take a look at this data, and this is probably a pretty good reading of where the economy is. Did the fund managers get it wrong? Maybe. We can go here, and then we can go here, and we can go here. And so this is the entire quarter, and I might argue that this is clearly favoring discretionary, communication services, and technology. And the interesting thing about this, actually, here, let's make that a little better. Interesting thing about this is, what were the names that we said were starting to actually look technically attractive? They were pretty strong. Here, let me finish this. So this is what has done well over this past quarter. No, come on, gee whiz. I seem to be getting stuck on this. Let's try and do that again. Okay, so you get the idea. I find it interesting that this is actually where I think the economy actually is for this quarter. So fund managers thought we were here, but in reality, it looks like we're over here. So they thought we were here, but it looks like we're still here, which is fascinating, right? Because does that mean that the fund managers thought we were not as far along in this cycle as we actually are in reality? I don't know. What I do find interesting about this is, these guys clearly are leading sectors for this past quarter. And interesting how industrials and basic materials, like we said, those are the strongest sectors now, the ETFs. Let's watch how this part of this market does, or how these industrial names act. And actually interesting that Mexico would be part of that, right? Because they're talking about basically Mexico becoming the manufacturing powerhouse for North America now. So they did the holy deal with the Chinese, 20 years ago. And now that basically that's old, and the Chinese have basically they've done everything they want with the Chinese. Now they say, to hell with you, we're done with you. Now they're going to ramp up Mexico. But let's keep an eye on this. Who can tell me what chart pattern does that look like? Somebody should be able to tell me. That to me, it looks like a cup and handle pattern. So that's what I was going for. I'm just bugging you, Jay. I mean, I don't think you can call this a head and shoulders. I think this shoulder is just way too low here. But I definitely like the idea that we could call that a cup and handle. And maybe that's a shoulder. I don't know. I wouldn't. The knee-jerk reaction that I'm thinking here is cup and handle. So let's see how this acts, especially considering we're coming into the first 2 weeks of this new quarter. If this thing does break out and it actually is a cup and handle, then what that means is, gee whiz, industrials, they're moving along the sector. And actually, that means we're right in this area. Go figure. It is interesting. We were talking earlier about how energy is starting to firm up and how some of the commodities are starting to firm up, natural gas. I haven't looked at wheat today, but I don't think it's turned up just yet. If we do see the industrials start to actually outperform, then that would support the theory that indeed the economy is over here based on what we see out of the entire quarter, not over here. And what we should see is in the first 2 weeks of the quarter, money start pouring into this area of the market. Now, given what we talked about with energy and me wanting to be long energy, and of course we have that huge drawdown in oil inventories. You've heard me barking about natural gas recently. It is interesting how oil did so poorly, and energy in particular did so poorly this past quarter. Is this when energy actually starts to have its day in the sun again? Notice industrials, materials, energy. Are we going to start to see things like the XLE start to outperform? Might be interesting. Just take a look. Let's see what XLE looks like. All right. So if you were a betting man or a betting woman for that matter, does that look like a market that's trying to bottom or trying to top? And keep in mind, there's the top up there. I don't know whether I would necessarily call that a bottom or a top. Almost looks like it's the middle of the range, eh? I could see that it almost looks to me like we've got that. Sure looks to me like we're coming into some sort of apex here, right? Maybe what this thing needs is the next quarter where the industrials and the basic materials, they outperform. So that would be things like I showed you there just a moment ago, XLB. You can see the W and there's that cup and handle that we talked about. Does that actually fire? It's down on the day here now. But if that fires, that's going to be like a bullish bot for me. Right, so that would be there to there, 33 to 66. So there is 33, there's 66. And then there to there. Looks like that's a higher low. So there's your bot entry. If anything, we kind of would like this to calm down a little bit. If we're going to try and get in on this trade here, if anything, I want to see the market come back down and fill in this gap here. So this is the basic materials. This would be like your lumber and your coffee and your wheat and your natural gas. Well, maybe not natural gas, but copper, all that kind of stuff. I suppose you could argue too, LJs, right? We want to think about things like, can we get W's on other sides of trend lines? If anything, what I wouldn't mind is actually seeing this maybe consolidate a bit and then W out and see if we can somehow get something to set up off that bottom level. If this is cup and handle kind of price action, then maybe we can start thinking about things like Foggenbaum's going to the upside. And what do you think the odds are that Foggenbaum lines up with those? Oh yeah, look at that. So fascinating how the Foggenbaum bifurcation level actually lines up perfectly with the bull ABCD. You think that's an accident? I don't think so. Is this going to be inflationary? Yes, absolutely. And Mr. Powell has said, well, we're probably going to have to do a couple more rate increases before the end of the year. I think that makes sense given what I see here. And I think that's probably what they see too.